Hey everyone, Aaron here. Today we're going to be going over homework 2 for my Introduction to Programming class. I like to make these videos when the assignments are a little unclear or kind of difficult. Uh, the goal of this program was to create an array with variable size, and it can hold different elements. You can increase the size of the array, decrease the size of the array. That's kind of the main purpose. So just as an example, I can print the array. It starts off with 0 elements, so I went ahead and made it display no elements in the array. But I could add an element, so let's add 1 to it. So now if I look at the array, it's got elements 1 right here. So I can just keep adding elements. I'm going to add a 2, a 3, and a 4. So now it's got 1, 2, 3, and 4 in it. So based on that, you can look at the size of the array. So it says it's 4 elements, and then the program lets you delete the elements. So if I delete, how about the number 2, I can look at the size, so 1, 3, 4, and so now it's still a size of 4, but there's only 3 elements. So this is kind of the interesting property here, is that one of the elements just doesn't have a value, or we're not displaying that value anymore. So let's delete another element. And on this time, you'll notice the array size was reduced to 2, and that's because our professor said if the array size, or if the elements in the array is less than half of the array size, then just go ahead and reduce the array size. So that's why we did that. So we can now see there's 2 elements and the array size is 2. And then I'm just going to go ahead and exit. Boop. So I'm going to go over the code to kind of explain how all of that works. I went ahead and made 2 different functions. First, the print options. This is mostly optional. This function is only used once, and that's inside our while loop. But basically, it just prints out that menu you see at the start, including the your selection. The other one is a sort. And the sort I just basically pulled from the last homework. In the last homework, we had like a bonus for sort, and you can go ahead and use this. This is just a regular bubble sort. Very inefficient, but it gets the job done. Anyways, the reason we needed this is because every time the program finishes the loop, we want to sort the array so that the elements are in ascending order. So let's get into the main program. So I went ahead and set some variables we're going to need. So we have the array size, and then the actual number of elements in the array. So this is a kind of a key point here. So just because our array it can hold 2 elements doesn't mean it's currently holding any elements. So I could have, so like right here, when I initialize the array, there's just 2 pointers to different spots in memory, and then those parts in memory don't really have any specific values. Just like if you returned it, it gets this really weird negative, like large number, usually from what I find. So that means there's no elements in it. So this is going to be useful for when we're returning the arrays, the elements that are in the array. And then just array size is good for keeping track of the array size. And then next I made a boolean for if the program is running. So this is basically for a while loop. So basically this whole while loop's gonna trigger until my program's done running. So I can just set this to false, and then this, my program will stop. And then lastly, I have an int for your user input. So once all that's initialized, we get into actually running the program. So while the program's running, we're going to print the options. So again, that just prints all of this up here. And then we're going to get the user input. So, pretty self-explanatory. Just whatever the user inputs, it's going to be stored into user num input. And then, based on what they put, I used a switch statement that'll filter it into one of the case statements. So if they hit 5, that'll go ahead and end the program. Program running equals false. So that means it'll loop back up to here. It'll be false here now. And then so this whole thing will stop. It'll delete the array and then return 0. This delete here is important though because we don't want any memory leaks. I'll show you an example with and without the memory leak, just so you can kind of get an idea. So for each case, let's go into each one. So the first one is just printing out the elements. So I wanted to make sure that like if there isn't any elements, so like if elements is less than or equal to 0, it says there's no elements in the array. But if there is elements, we're just going to go ahead and print them all. And I kind of employed an interesting thing to, like if you noticed, I'm just going to add a couple elements. So if you notice, there's a comma here and a comma here, but not one here. So what I did was I basically used a for loop to print all of them, except for the last one. Because what I wanted to do is I wanted to print it, add a comma, print it, add a comma, and on the last one, print it without the comma. So it prints all of them except for the last one, which is why we have the -1 here. And then it prints the last one here. So pretty easy. And the reason I'm using elements here instead of array size is because we don't want to print any of the elements that, well, don't exist, basically. So if my array size is 2 and I have one element, I don't want to print the second element because it doesn't exist. On to the second case here, we have add an element to the array. So basically it asks what the user wants. And an interesting thing here, I'm using user num input again, and that's because I've already used it here, and it's usually not good practice to use the same variable. But the fact is I'm not using user num input after this point. Like, it hits the end of the loop and then it comes back and then it resets it here. So it's fine if I use it within this case statement. So anyways, the user num input gets changed based on what number you want. And then I have two different cases here. So if the elements is less than array size, then simply add that element to the array. So basically, if it can fit it inside the array, it'll add it in, and then increase the element number. But here's the case. If there's no space in the array, we have to increase the array size. So in order to do that, we need to create a new array, so I called it temp array, and I made it the size of the original size plus 1. So I increased the size by 1. And then what I did was we went through each element in the array, excluding the last element, because that array doesn't exist. So when I was going back, I realized I messed up with something. When I was explaining this for loop here, basically it's going to look through every element that exists. You can switch this to elements and it'll make no difference since element and array size are the same, because we only added one element, and if that like before we even add the element, they're the same size because it's at max. So either element or array size is fine right here, and the reason array size is fine is because the reason array size is fine is because we haven't actually added one to it yet. So it's still the same size as elements. So we create the new array, we set all the values to the old array, and then we delete the original array. We don't want that original array anymore. And then right here we're setting the original array pointer to the temp array pointer. So basically we got rid of everything from the first array, and now we're saying this array looks at this memory location, which holds the other array. And then, so here, we're setting that last element to the whatever the user put, and then we're increasing the array size and the element size, since that's what we did here. Alright, so now we're on to deleting the elements. Again, the same kind of user num input here. And so, alright, I'm re-recording this part of the video. I talked about found element and all this stuff. I'm going to recode it real quick, just because it doesn't make sense and then actually causes a small error. So I'm going to get rid of this. So basically I'm creating a bool found element, and I'm going to set it to false. So basically it'll only be set to true when the element's found. So we're going to go through every element in the array, and let's see, let's get rid of this for now. So here we go. So if the user input is found, so it's going to check through every array element until it finds the user input. If it is found, we're going to set it to true. And if it is found and the I is less than elements minus 1, then we're going to set the value to the next value. And this should be, oops, true. I'm used to GameMaker Studio or Python where you could just set this to 1 since true is equivalent to 1. So what did I do? So once it does find the element, it's going to replace whatever element it's currently on with the next element. So if I have 3 elements and I find the middle one will get replaced by the last element, and then since the current position is less than the total elements, then it won't do anything with that last element. It'll just kind of leave it there in the void. And then also we're going to switch found element to true here. So if it does find a number, it'll run this, but if it doesn't, it just says error, that whatever number we put in is not in the array. So here we are decreasing the elements, and then our professor basically wanted us to reduce the elements if the number of elements is less than or equal to half the array size. And then in this case here, I made this just so that it doesn't happen for 2, because I don't really want it going from like 1 or 2 to like 0 array size. So this is just basically just a safety caution. Just to kind of show what I mean here, this basically prevents it from, 1 second here. So like let's say I have 3 elements in here right now, 1, 2, and 3. If I delete 1 and I delete 2, it's going to reduce the size to 1. But like if I in this case, if I didn't have that array size greater than or equal to 3, and I deleted this last, oops. Okay, if I deleted that last element, and there's no elements in the array, it would have reduced the array size to 0, and I wasn't really sure if they wanted that. It kind of would mess up some of my other code, and I just didn't want that to happen. Or at least I thought it might. I didn't really test it, but just a safety precaution. So how does this work? So basically the same as adding the array. So I set the temp array to the size of elements, since if we're dividing it by 2, the elements is always going to be half of array size, because we're subtracting 1 each time. So let's say they're both 4. Elements is 4, array size is 4. So we're looking for when elements is less than or equal to 2 in this case. So elements is 4, we subtract 1, it's 3. We subtract another, it's 2. Array size 2 is less than or greater than 2. So it's always going to be half in this case. So that's why I set the new the new array size to be just elements. Elements is always going to be half in this case. Or however many elements you have. So like in the case of 3 elements and an array size of 3, it's gonna go 1, you can't have 1.5, so it reduces down to 1. So it kind of just rounds down. But anyways, it works for all your situations. In this case, we're basically just doing the same thing. You're setting the temp array size to the old array, or not the size, the elements to the old array elements. But this time we're using elements here, since we don't want to use the array size, the previous array size, because the previous array size is much larger than our new array size. So basically whatever's here you're going to post here, because you don't want it to be bigger than this, than the size of the array. And then again, delete the old array, set the array to the new array. And then we say the array size is equal to elements, since that's what we made the array size here. Array size reduced to the array size. Easy enough. And last but not least, just a simple statement saying what the array size is and how many elements it has. And then 5, we already went over, that's your programming false. And so here's the interesting thing. So let's say I have, let me go back to viewing small window. Okay, so let's say I add 2 to the array, and then I also add 4, and let's add 1. So I added 2, 4, and 1. But if I look at the numbers, it's already in order, 1, 2, 4. So what I did was, at the end of the switch statement, so basically at the end of our while loop as well, I added here's the end of the switch. I added this sort, which is the function we were talking about earlier. Basically, it only runs if there's elements to sort, so if there's more than one element. Takes in your array, takes in the number of elements, and then sorts those elements. So if your array size is, so make sure you don't do array size here. Because if your array size is 5 and you only have 3 elements, well then it's going to try to sort those elements that, aren't in your array, and you're going to get some wacky numbers. So at the very end of your program, you're going to need to delete your array. So it's going to be delete and then array. But just for testing sake, I'm going to show you what happens when you don't delete it, just so you can see what the program does if there is a memory leak, and then what it does when there's not. So that's the program. I'm going to go ahead and upload this to the server and show you what that looks like. Alright, so I already have FileZilla and PuTTY open. FileZilla is what I'm going to use to transfer the file over, and then PuTTY is what I'm going to use to test the program for memory leaks and compile the CPP into just a regular file that you can run. So I've already logged into both. If you're trying to do this at home, so I don't really have much luck for you. I don't think we're really supposed to share the lecture slides. But for those of you in my class, it's lecture slide 2, and then there's an email about how to log into the server. Oops. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer the source file over. Boom, easy peasy. And then, so now we should be able to, see this file in the directory. So we got source.ppp. So one of the first things we need to do is change the source into a file that we can run. So just use this code. I'm gonna call it temp for now, since I've already uploaded my homework and I don't want to overwrite it. But for you, you would probably do like homework 2 right here. And then let's check it for memory leaks. So now we're going to use valgrind leak check to test the program. So it's just basically going to run your program, and you can do your user inputs. I'm going to go ahead and add a bunch of elements. And then I'm going to delete the elements. So let's see, we got 4 and 5. Okay, array size 2, elements 2. Cool. So basically you want to run through everything your program does. So I added elements, I deleted elements, I made it to where it reduces the array size. Pretty much did everything that the program can do. And then I'm going to exit. And so we can see here, there's one block here. And this is the summary here. This is what you're going to want to look at. This will tell you where it happened. So mine happened at the very end of the program. But the summary here is your overall how many memory leaks you had. And so in my case, I had 1. And we already know where that is. That's right over here. Let's go ahead and delete array. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and upload this again. Boom. Boom. Yeah, we're going to override. Okay, compile it again. By the way, I'm popping up these commands by just pressing up. It pops up your most recent commands. Alright, so we're going to add elements. Okay, I'm going to delete some elements now. delete 1, delete 2, delete 3. So we only have 4 left. Yep. Okay, now let's exit. So now it says here, there was no errors, so no leaks are possible. So that's what you want to see in the end. I hope this helps everybody with their program. In the end, you should have, in your directory, should have your homework 2 and homework2.cpp. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the temp file and then the source that I uploaded. But I do hope this helps everybody with your assignment. Have a great day.